As soon as you learn how to eat, you have to learn how to cheat.
I'm Corey Probst. I'm the wellness director here at the Diet Doc. I see a lot of familiar faces.
But I want to go over 5 strategies because potato chips am I going to eat? I mean, just think how ridiculous that would be to have to do that all the time.
About big eating, binge eating.
But we've got a big topic for you tonight. It's metabolism. And Joe, I know, will do an excellent job of dispelling some of the big myths about metabolism. He's going to turn some of these metabolism topics upside down for you all. And I know much of what he's going to say is really going to surprise you. So enjoy the lecture tonight, and thank you again for joining us.
But the reason this topic is so important, almost 20 years ago, I started writing my first book. And some people thought it was kind of weird that I titled that book Metabolic Transformation. And in my mind at that time, I already knew how difficult it was for people to lose weight on a sustained, permanent basis. And one of my biggest principles that I just thought, if I'm going to do anything in this industry to make a difference, it has to be to teach people that metabolism is very dynamic. There's not a one-size-fits-all plan. The same diet's not going to work the same way for the same person forever. All of this stuff is in constant flow. So metabolic transformation, that whole concept that you can change your metabolism, that it's dynamic, and now here we are 20 years later, and I don't want to say that the industry's caught up to me in any way. It's just become a fascination, and I think because people just don't understand it. So we're going to talk about 2 sets of things tonight, so 2 groups of 5. If you've got a notebook at home, I want you to write down just number 1 through 5 twice. I'm going to talk about the 5 biggest metabolic myths, and then 5 ways that you can make sure your metabolism is ramped up to your best genetic capacity. So number 1, the first, and this is huge, the first metabolic myth is that a fast metabolism is a healthy metabolism. We all want to think that if we're super healthy and active and fit and so forth, that we're going to have the best metabolism off the charts and we can eat anything we want. The first biggest myth of 5 is that a fast metabolism is a healthy metabolism. So what I want you to consider is that as you lose weight, as you get leaner, you are literally becoming healthier. Your heart doesn't have to work as hard, your lungs aren't working as hard, even your muscular system doesn't have to work as hard to propel you throughout your daily activities. So actually, a healthy metabolism is going to come down. Just consider heart rate. If you're out of shape, you might think, gosh, just sitting on the couch, my heart rate's 100. But if you're super healthy, you've heard athletes kind of brag that their resting heart rate is 42 or 48 or 50. And of course, that means that your heart is working less hard. It's easier for your body to maintain itself. You might recall some controversial studies a couple years ago about mice. And when they fed mice 1/3 fewer calories than they needed to live. So they were perpetually starving these mice. They were eating 1/3 of their calories less than they actually needed to survive. Those mice lived 1/3 longer, 30% longer than their peers. So eating less food, having a slower metabolism is actually healthier. Think about it on the cellular level. When every one of your cells in your body, maybe 100 trillion cells, works a little bit less hard, it just doesn't have to metabolize as much food. It's not removing waste as quickly. Everything is on a slower pace. Things last longer. So you're aging slower. Now, here's the good news. If the first metabolic myth is that a fast metabolism is healthy, shouldn't we still at least want it to be optimal? We don't want to suppress it or decrease it, and that's exactly right. So I'm going to address some of that stuff, how metabolism suppression and adaptation occurs, and we want to avoid that. But don't think that your metabolism or your caloric needs are going to increase as you get lean and healthy. That is absolutely wrong. So let's move on to the second one. The second one is that if my weight loss slows or I'm just having trouble, it must be the diet's fault. I probably worked with tens of thousands of clients over the years. And every time somebody plateaus or they run into a little snag, I don't reflexively just start changing the entire diet. I immediately look for user error. It's so ironic that after holidays, all of a sudden, everybody's not losing weight. Guess what? Did the diet stop working? No, everybody hits little blips in the screen. They're going to families' houses. They're doing little things. I don't want to call it cheating. Just real life occurs, and we might have a neutral week. That doesn't mean we have to scrap the whole plan. You would be shocked how many times a week, just by asking the right questions, we find calculation errors. We find different foods that they might not have even considered had the calorie level that they thought. All kinds of little things, intentional and unintentional, come into play. And that can really stagnate a diet, and it's not the diet's fault. So always look for those exceptions first. Look for problems in your execution before you scrap the whole diet, and maybe you just need to tinker with it a little bit. So that's number two, is that if a diet is faulty, you're automatically going to stop losing weight. That's not true. Sometimes it can be something very, very minor to fix. The third thing is eating more will raise my metabolism. And I hear this all the time. You know, I'm just losing kind of slow, so I think what I need to do is eat more food. If I eat more food, my metabolism will be fantastic. And that's partially true. Of course, when you eat more food, your metabolism is going to rise. Maybe recently, over the course of the Super Bowl or New Year's Eve or the holidays, you might have experienced eating a whole lot of food, and what happens? Your heart rate starts surging, you're sweating. All of those things show an increase in metabolism. So we should just overeat all the time, right? That's what will make our metabolism high. Well, if you want the body fat that comes along with it, that's true. If you don't want that extra body fat, you have to consider the fine line between the fact that it takes a calorie deficit to actually lose weight and then having these surges in your food intake, or at least an appropriate food intake level to keep your metabolism high. So let me talk about it this way. If we look at the USDA, they have recommendations for calorie needs, our government does. And me, a 44-year-old male who's almost 5'8", they would say I require 2,200 calories a day, and if I'm active, 2,800 calories. I know what my calorie needs are. I lift hard, I do aggressive functional training, I do cardio. You're going to see me in a gym 6 or 7 days a week, and I've been that way for over 30 years. So I would consider myself high on the activity level. Still, if I ate 2,800 calories a day, and that's what the government says I need, I would add about 52 pounds of body fat in 1 year, because I know what my metabolism requires. I know what it's capable of. That comes down to my body type and my genetics. So if I just go by what the government says, I'm going to be 52 pounds overweight by this time next year. For a 5'4" female, I just took an average height of a female, the government would say she needs 2,000 calories a day or 2,400 if active. That is insane as an average. And if I'm saying that's insane as an average, 50% of women are even farther below that. So you have to realize that somatotype or genetics, body type, has more to say about what you need than just a recommended daily allowance or some blogger or some article in a pseudoscience magazine. So understand calorie needs. Matter of fact, let me address it one more way. When we look at the need of calories person to person, it is far more important to understand your genetics than what just some arbitrary scale says. And I want you to consider one thing. From this point to 30 years ago, almost every measurement of food has doubled. In other words, the average bagel size today is twice what it was 30 years ago. The average hamburger size, the average soda size, everything is double. And we're a lot less active. And I want you to consider what the biometric study of human basal metabolism studied almost 100 years ago. The average male metabolism, they decided, was 1,632 calories. Compare that to them saying that I need today 2,800. And the average female needs about 1,350. Compare that to 2,000 or 2,400. And you might start to see why 50% of our population is going to be clinically obese by 2030. It's not necessarily our metabolisms as a human race that all of a sudden are suffering some kind of ill effect from the environment or food intake or something like that. It has to do with how we behave with our food, with the food portions, activity, and so forth. So let me review real quick and catch us up. Number one myth. A fast metabolism is a healthy metabolism. Wrong. A healthy metabolism is actually slower, so you're preserving or conserving energy, life at the cellular level. When you're healthier, your heart rate, resting heart rate is lower, your heart is more efficient, your muscular system isn't having to carry around as much body weight. That's when you are healthier. And it's all relative. Hunger, energy levels, things like that will be relative to that. But don't think that as you get leaner and healthier, you can actually eat more. You will be more satisfied and less hungry on the appropriate amount of food, not seeking to eat anything you want. So number 2, slow weight loss is an indicator that the diet is a complete failure. You might have to adjust some things. You might have to be more objective. You might have to be more consistent. But stick with something you've started just to see if it's going to work. Don't always blame the diet. Number 3, eating more will help my metabolism. Absolutely, it will help your metabolism, and you will probably also gain body fat if you're eating too much. So again, going back to today's standards for what health agencies say we need to eat versus what has been studied in labs, there's a far, far gigantic gap between those two numbers. You can't listen to people who write magazine articles and say this is what you need. You need to focus on your body and your genetics. So number 4, this is a good one. My metabolism is just destroyed. Whatever diet I was on, whatever horrible consultant I was with, now all of a sudden my metabolism is destroyed and I can't recover. I'm ruined. First of all, I want to focus in on the fact that when you diet for a long, long time, we automatically think that that's going to suppress our metabolism and we're going to fail to lose weight. I want you to consider 2 things, and I really don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to be too graphic, but I want you to consider that somebody who's suffering from the disease anorexia, what do they look like in the hospital bed before they die at 60 or 70 pounds? Did their metabolism stop working, so all of a sudden they're just laying there overweight? No, you starved to death, literally. Look at POWs. Look at situations in those war type scenarios, and what do those people look like? All of a sudden, because they've stopped eating or their nutrition is substandard, are they sitting around overweight? Absolutely not. Again, as kind of barbarian as those 2 examples are, I want you to consider that if you're eating less than your body needs, you will lose weight. Metabolic suppression and metabolic adaptation will occur. Your body will start to come down, but it doesn't come to a screeching halt unless you're just eating too much food. So I want you to also consider some of the real studies out there. You can get on Google Scholar, you can look up these things. But it takes about 12 weeks for you to substantially start reducing your metabolism. And you have to be on what's called a very low calorie diet, 500 calories or less. Not a 500 calorie deficit, but consuming 500 calories. If you do that, then within about 8 to 12 weeks, you're going to see your metabolism start sliding down upwards of about 40 to 45%. It's difficult to measure anything less than that. It just doesn't happen. Your heart still has to work. Your body still has to work. So your metabolism does not tank. That is an absolute myth. And sometimes we have to just come to grips with what we're doing consistently. I've done tons of talks and written tons of articles on metabolic positioning and how you can lose weight up to 50% faster with just consistency and getting into the metabolic position to lose weight. That is far more often the case than just the fault of a diet or eating too little. So again, we don't want to suppress the metabolism inadvertently. We don't want to suppress it to levels that we don't have to, but it is a fact that you will not destroy your metabolism with poor eating unless you eat 500 calories or less for an extremely sustained period of time. I hope you guys aren't being too offended by these things, but absolute truth in the research, and I want you guys to look this up and verify it for yourselves. The last thing we're going to talk about is hormonal issues, because an awful lot of times I have a client who we've gone through every single fix. We've looked at everything we can, and they still can't lose weight. And I might suggest to them, because they have other symptoms, like being extremely cold, fatigued, maybe some skin changes and hair changes, thinning hair. And I might suggest to them, hey, you should really get your thyroid checked or get a hormone panel. And just about every time I ever suggest that, because I'm looking at those symptoms, it's very true. But that's only 5% of the time. 5% of the population actually has a thyroid condition that requires medication and that indicates a substandard or suboptimal level of performance of the thyroid. If that's the case, it has to be addressed. But I've also had clients that have gone and gotten those tests just because they think their metabolism is destroyed and their hormones are perfectly fine. So again, 5% of the time, if you're having other symptoms like that, just super low energy, high fatigue, things like that, you're cold all the time, low energy, definitely consider getting that checked. But you're probably going to be in that 95% that at least is on the low end of normal. So quick review before we get on to how to fix this mess. So again, I just want to review the 5 biggest metabolic myths. The first one, of course, that your metabolism has to be fast to be healthy. When you are healthy, your metabolism will be slow, just like your heart rate is lower, and you're not having to carry around so much extra body weight. That is healthier. That's what gives you a longer lifespan, better longevity, is the fact that at the cellular level, your metabolism is slower, not faster. And that's okay. Like I said, it's very relative. You will feel better. You'll be healthier. Your energy will be higher. Your hunger is going to be down. It's not true that you have to have a fast metabolism. The second one is that slow weight loss means that the diet is a failure. Look at all those other variables. Check your tracking and your food objectivity, your consistency in tracking and so forth. And really look scientifically at what you're doing with your food and how it fits your body type. The third myth is that eating more is going to help my metabolism. I'm kind of hedging calling that one a myth because eating more will increase your metabolism, but it's also going to mean you're going to gain weight or it's going to stall your weight loss because eating more will likely carry you out of that calorie deficit into weight gain or at least stability. So hopefully you listened to some of those stats I gave you on basal metabolic rate testing versus arbitrary standards by government agencies. Big difference. The fourth thing, my metabolism is destroyed, that global catastrophic mindset, that some bad diet I had a horrible experience with and now I just can't lose weight anymore. The metabolism can recover and it recovers quickly. It takes small steps, but as you incrementally bring your food intake up, you can raise your metabolism back up. Your metabolism is extremely resilient, not the opposite. And the last thing, of course, is that hormonally we're broken, our metabolism is damaged, there's no repairing it. In only 5% of people do they exhibit blood chemistry profiles indicative of lower thyroid and something that needs hormonal replacement therapy. Just not true unless you're in that 5%. So I'm betting on 95% versus 5%. But if you have any of those symptoms, like we talked about, get checked. So what are the 5 things you can do to really get your metabolism to its most optimal level, even though we know that being healthy means it's going to be a little bit slower than if you're overweight? The number one thing is, again, understanding your genetics and your body type. Why is my metabolism slower than what the government agencies would say? Probably because on my family's side, my family history, we do have slower metabolic rates. I've been tested to be at a subclinical hypothyroid level. I have family members who are obese. I've had uncles die at 400 or 500 pounds. And so it stands to reason that with my genetics, I'm more of an endomorph. I just require fewer calories. So there are 2 sides to that coin. It's a double-edged sword. There are pros and cons. But understand your genetics, and you can't compare yourself to a standard or a friend. It has to be your genetics. The second thing you can do to fix it, once you understand it, is to make sure you're extremely objective with food intake. If you're not tracking your food, if you're not weighing things, if you're just taking a tablespoon and saying, hey, here's some peanut butter, and you're taking out a half a cup instead of a literal tablespoon, you're never going to know what your body's capable of. So it takes some objectivity, it takes some tracking, and I think you need to look at it as a long-term learning project. Learn about nutrition, learn about your body type. A third thing, and I just wrote an article about this for our newspaper, is meal spacing. Huge continuum here. We went from all the grazing and the 6 meals a day to now we have intermittent fasting, people advocating 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day. You know what? Studies show that both can work, both extremes, but somewhere in the middle, understanding the context of your day is where you need to fall. There are days you're going to train extremely hard, and because your body is using food for hours afterward at a higher level, you might be hungry. You might need to eat a little more frequently. You might have days when you're sitting on the couch on the computer or you're just out and about and you don't feel like you need that much food. It's okay to have spans of time in between, especially with whole food. You might not understand how long it takes to actually digest that food, get it completely out of your stomach, and then you've got hours in your small intestine where absorption is occurring. It can take 6 or 7 hours for you to completely go through a meal cycle. So dumping more food on top of food isn't necessarily what's going to get you body fat loss. So again, there are some times you do need smaller, more frequent meals. Sometimes you need larger, what I call anchor meals, and to really help the satiety through your day. But it's a mixed bag dependent on your genetics, your goals, the type of nutrition plan you're on, and the context of the very day. So number 1 was understanding your body type. Number 2 was being very objective. Number 3 is understanding how to use meal spacing for your benefit. Number 4 is to give yourself some metabolic breaks. This may include something like a higher carb day once a week or kind of a relaxed meal. Sometimes if you've been losing a lot of weight, we've had clients lose 100, 150, 200 pounds. Sometimes you need to take a week or a month or a couple months off, not to eat whatever you want, but just to slowly bring your food intake back up so you're pushing back metabolic suppression. And then you're going to head back into it with a higher metabolic level. When I said that metabolism is only suppressed with extreme calorie deficits, it can also be suppressed with extreme dieting duration. So sometimes you need those breaks, small ones every week or every month, sometimes over the course of a year. The last thing, of course, is training. Exercise, exercise, exercise. I know many people watching this love to train. You're in the gym all the time like I am. That's never going to leave you. That's fantastic. Other people just hate it. They hate going to the gym. It's not something they like. And still, we have to have that consistent pressure and resistance against our body, against our heart, our lungs, our muscular system, our skeletal system. That's what will help you sustain metabolic weight loss for a long, long time. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Again, I apologize for the feeds we dropped. We went about 30 minutes, which was about 10 minutes longer than I wanted because we kept having to reestablish the feed. But we're going to archive this, and I hope you come back next month as we go through different topics in behavioral medicine with our wellness director, Corey Probst. We're going to keep attacking different types of lectures and information on physiology and weight loss and all those things that we all like to talk about. So for now, I want to say thank you very much, and we will see you next time.